I'm a 21-year-old male, and this experience happened last summer, while I was on vacation at Myrtle Beach with my family. We were staying in a resort right on the beach, and we're on the 13th and 14th floor in a sort of timeshare. One night, I was feeling restless and having a hard time falling asleep, and at around 3 a.m., I decided to go out to the balcony to get some air. I stepped out and was stunned as there was a full moon, and the moonlight on the water was really beautiful. The beach was completely empty as far as I could see, and I had never seen it like that before. I decided since I wasn't able to sleep, I might as well head down, take a stroll, and listen to some music to relax. Hopefully, when I returned, I would be able to get some sleep. It was really unsafe and dumb of me, but since it was 3 a.m. and the rest of my family was asleep, I decided to just head down without letting anyone know I was going, as I thought I would just go and chill there for 10 to 15 minutes and then come right back up. So, at the base of the timeshare we were at, there was an area with a pool, an outdoor bar, and then two boardwalks separated by about 10 feet, which both led to the beach. On the sides of the boardwalks, there were swaths of tall grass separating the ocean and the resort. When I got down to the base, the entire area was completely deserted, and I started walking down the boardwalk on the right towards the beach. As I'm walking down, I suddenly see someone approaching me from the beach, which was strange because I had a pretty clear view of the same area from the balcony just before, and I had literally seen no one. I started to get a bit nervous, and I see this figure approach, and as I get closer, I see that it's a man, maybe in his late 30s, who has a backpack on and is wearing glasses with large, square lenses. As he gets closer, I get a clearer look at him as the boardwalk is sort of illuminated by lights from the outdoor bar. He looks very on edge and alert, almost like he's trying to find someone who is trying to meet him in this area, and his clothes are somewhat tattered. We made eye contact and I sort of nodded him and passed. At this point I'm creeped out, cause honest to God, he had the sort of Jeffrey Dahmer look. Maybe it was the glasses, and he didn't seem like he actually belonged to the timeshare. I shake it off and keep walking down to the beach, and I put my headphones in. As I get to the beach, I turn right and start walking parallel to the water, and I'm just taking in the scenery. I'm barefoot and decide that it would be nice to walk just along the shoreline, so I move closer to the water and continue walking. I'm walking for no longer than a minute before I get a really strange feeling that something is wrong. I take off my headphones and turn around, and I see a dark figure that is trailing me just up shore. He is situated in between me and the timeshare. I can immediately tell from the figure's height, body type, and demeanor that this is the same man I had passed on the boardwalk. At this point, I'm starting to panic, as every story from Let's Not Meet is rushing to my head. At the same time, I'm trying to rationalize, as it feels too surreal that it may actually be a dangerous situation. So I remind myself that it could just be a coincidence, and the man decided that he also wanted to take a walk on the beach, and just happened to be headed in the same direction as me. So I take some breaths and turn my head back to the ocean and continue walking in the same direction. After a couple of seconds, I turn my head back again and see that now he is much closer to me and is now walking parallel to me, but is definitely actually walking towards me. I pick up my walking speed now, and I turn my head back around and see that he is matching my faster pace and is still walking towards me and the water. Still, for some reason I think, okay, maybe he also wants to walk by the water, There's no way I'm actually being followed by a creepy man on a deserted beach. So at this point, I truly test it. I do a 180 and completely change directions. And as I turn my head, I see him completely change directions with me and continue closing the distance. And he's power walking now. It suddenly hits me that I'm in a really bad situation, and I take off on a run along the water, and he starts running as well, but stays up short of me so that if I try to run up towards the boardwalk, he will intercept me. I'm freaking out now and just keep running with no plan, but figure that I'm 20 and sort of fit. I should probably be able to keep running along the water and outrun him, and then find some other exit off the beach and either call my family or head back to the timeshare on the road. So I keep running, but he's keeping up with me. Man, this goes on for what feels like 10 to 15 minutes. The scariest part of all this, which I wouldn't have thought of, is it is completely dead silent. All I hear is my breath and the feet in the sand, and when I turn, I only see his shadowy figure up shore keeping pace with me. Suddenly, up ahead in the sand, I see a small blue light, and what looks like 4 people on the beach with a blanket. They're a bit upshore. I turn and look at the figure and bet even though they are upshore, I can beat him to these people. So I start sprinting towards them with hopes of quickly telling them what's going on so we can all confront him. I really use up my energy sprinting towards them, and as I approach, my heart drops. What I see is 4 guys in a blanket, with 3 or 4 handles of hard liquor surrounding them. 3 of the handles are empty, and the 4th is about half empty. 3 of the guys are completely passed out in the blankets, and the last is half sat up, obviously beyond drunk, with a sort of party hat on that has blue lights on it, and he's talking to himself. His eyes are half closed and he doesn't even register me approaching him, even though now I'm no more than 5 feet away. I turn and see the figure has slowed down and is observing me, and then I see he makes sense of the group state and suddenly starts sprinting at me. As he gets closer, the half-passed out guy's blue light illuminates him, and I can clearly see it's the same guy as before. I make eye contact with him, and I can see he's wide-eyed and looks almost manic, and is barreling at me full sprint. At this point, I decide I have to do something decisive. It seemed like I had underestimated his fitness, and since I just sprinted towards the group and exhausted myself, I was afraid that he might actually be able to catch me if we just continued running along the beach indefinitely, and then who knows what. So, instead of turning around and running, I suddenly sprint towards him, and to the right, which I don't think he was expecting at all. I catch him off balance and run past him, and I literally am full sprinting back to the timeshare without even looking back. Literally all the hairs on my neck were standing, and it felt like a dream where you're barely evading someone, but he's right about to catch you. The adrenaline was crazy, and I keep running, and I start to see the timeshare. I finally turn around to see how close he is, and I see him in the distance, maybe 400 or 500 feet away. He's lost a lot of distance on me. I don't waste any time and I sprint up the boardwalk and towards the base of the timeshare. I jam the elevator buttons and I leap in, and start mashing the closed door button as I'm gasping for air. The door closes and I hit the button from my floor, and when the elevator reaches, I literally sprint back to my room, open the door, enter, and then slam the door and double lock it. I'm breathing heavy and I drop to the floor and just sit there for a minute, not believing what just happened. I crouch and crawl over to my room, as I was literally afraid he might be able to see me through the window of our balcony, and I enter my room. Let's just say, I definitely wasn't able to sleep after that. When I was 7 or 8, my family went to the beach and rented a room. We had the kind of rooms where you rent out both and they connect through a door. Like there's the doors to leave the room, and the doors to the other room. In the room connected to ours, there was this army family, a military dad, some kids, and a wife. My older sister was supposed to be watching me, as we were down at the jacuzzi during the evening. As we were playing and hanging out and just having a good time. I didn't get out much. I was naive and all around a little kid. And this mom literally sits in the jacuzzi with us. She starts talking to us and just making herself real comfortable. I was very naive as a kid. Eventually, we started talking books and she's talking about her kids, who were never even seen. And we're just having a good conversation. Really in depth, I felt like. My sister decides that she wants to go back to the room, but I don't. I wanted to stay and talk with the mom. So, my sister goes back to the room and now it's just 7-year-old me and some 40-year-old woman. It should have set off some creepy alerts, but it didn't. So, she starts talking about going and walking on the beach. It's like 10 p.m. and she wants to go walk on the beach and get shells. And being a kid, I thought it was a great idea. I'd get to walk on the beach at night. I felt so free and like a big kid. I didn't need my sister or anything. So, I run back to the room to tell my grandparents that I'm walking on the beach with Sue, or whatever her name was. I remember my grandmother reading her book, barely listening to what I said. She just shooed me off. It's important to know that I didn't live with my parents. So, I start walking down the creepy motel corridor. Really, it was a dark, dim stairwell at a cheap motel on the beach. So, I'm going through the stairwell like something out of a movie. Too bad, I've never seen this movie. So, I'm walking through the stairwell. The mom's way at the bottom telling me to hurry up and this and that. While walking through the stairs, the army dad comes running hauling butt to where I'm at. And he told me, "Your mom is calling you. It's really important, we gotta go." And he basically grabbed me by my wrist, softly, not aggressively, and led me back to our room. He knocked on the door and explained what had happened. I never thought much of it until about a year ago when it came back to me. This woman was leading me away to the beach alone at night, and this army guy had a terrible feeling in his gut, so we intervened. When he said my mom was looking for me, as I don't live with my mom, it set off some alarms in my head. It's when I realized something was up. So I didn't resist going back to my family. As a kid, I knew since he was saying my mom wanted me that it was important. I just knew something was up because I don't live with my mom. I'm now 20 years old and I truly believe that mom was trying to lure me away to do God knows what. And this army dude had a bad feeling and saved my life. Thinking back, I get such a bad feeling all throughout my body. I know now I wouldn't have made it back from that beach trip. Thank you, army dude. Your gut feeling and having a watchful eye saved something terrible from happening. That woman was creepy, and I never saw her kids. This happened on a beach in the Philippines about 2 years ago. Me and my friends decided to take a quick vacation to let off some steam from work. On our first night, we decided to drink just outside of our hotel room. We got a little tipsy and one of my friends decided to take a walk on the beach to try to meet some other tourists here. I had a bad feeling about what might happen to him since he was already drunk. So I decided to join together with another friend. He said that he wanted to visit the rock formations, which was a known hookup spot since the place was dark, and there was no other establishment on that part of the shoreline. It stretches to about half the length of a football court with pure darkness. I was reluctant about the idea of him going, but he was adamant. So I agreed, as long as he comes back after a few minutes. Me and my other friend waited on the last bar on the end of the shoreline before the dark area starts. Me and my friend were talking about something when we heard a gut-wrenching scream. It sounded like our friend, so we decided to rush in. The only light at that time is coming from the moon, so my friend decided to pull out his phone and turn on the flashlight. We asked around and saw some people hooking up on the sand. We asked if they saw our friend, giving them descriptions on what he might look like, but they said that they never saw him. Our hearts were pounding at this point because we don't know what might have happened to him. We ran until we reached the end of it. There was a huge rock on the shore about 15 feet tall with a local guy standing on top of it. We asked him, "Have you seen our friend?" He was about my height wearing a black shirt. He said, "Was he gay?" I didn't see the relevance of that question, but I said yes. "Well, he might have went there in the mangroves," and then pointed to a darker part of the beach filled with mangroves. Using only the light on the phone, we tried searching the small area. It looks like a tiny shelter with the overgrown plants acting as the roof. When we turned back, the guy on the top of the rock is already walking towards us. And then two more guys popped up behind him, probably hiding behind the huge rock. "He wasn't there," I said. And then the guy who was on the rock did a karate chop on my friend's arm, making him let go of his phone, which was successful, as the phone rolled in the sand. My friend was able to grab the phone, and that's when he shouted, "Run!" I was confused with what just happened, that I just started running after he said run, without actually knowing what we were running for. And that's when it hit me that it was an ambush, that we were led into the mangroves for them to steal my friend's phone. I was running for a few seconds when I started feeling the weight on my feet. The sandals that I was wearing got really heavy because I wasn't aware I had been running on wet sand. My friend took off his flip-flops for him to run faster. I wanted to do the same, but I then realized my sandals were strap-on, so I just continued running. I could hear the guys chasing us saying, "Hey, stop, we're just joking." I don't want to fall for what they said, so I continue running, and my legs are starting to feel numb since I'm not really an athletic person. There came a point where I wanted to just stop since I didn't have anything valuable with me. But then I thought that could be a reason for them to harm me, so I ran with all my might till we got to the first bar. My friend was already there catching his breath when we saw the friend that we were looking for, laughing and talking to the locals. We wanted to punch him for what he put us through, but he had no idea what just happened, so we let it go. Our vacation still went through, and we still go to that island from time to time, but we vowed to never go to that side of the beach ever again. Now, that part of the beach has already been closed to tourists. So, to those guys who tried to mug us on the beach, please, let's not meet. And one other thing. My friend said he wasn't the one who screamed, but it sounded like him. If it wasn't him, then who was it? I've been debating if I wanted to post this story because it was really unnerving. However, with all this quarantine going on, I figured that I might as well share this story in order to kill some time. For the past 2 years, I've been working at a haunted house attraction. It's a really fun gig, but the job tends to attract some rather creepy individuals. For the 2 years that I've worked there, there has always been some kind of creep that works there. I have another post that recounts the first year's scary incident. It's still up there if you want to check it out. This post in particular will recount my second year's creepy incident. I'll start this story with orientation day. This is where we meet all the other fellow actors and choose our roles. When I had walked into the building, my heart fell to the pit of my stomach. A man who looked like the same creeper from my first year at the haunted house was waiting for orientation to start. But I knew that it couldn't possibly be the same man, because the man from my first year had ended himself months ago. And to make matters even stranger, this man even had the same name, Daniel. So at first I thought this was all a wild coincidence. There's no way this man will also turn out to be a creep. Boy, was I wrong. Allow me to describe Daniel. He was a man probably in his late 40s or early 50s. He was a short and pudgy man. From the beginning, everyone could kind of tell that he was a little socially awkward, and there's nothing wrong with that. But he really did kind of creep out most of the workers. Additionally, he couldn't drive, so he was either super early to work or super late, and he was usually the last to leave. So overall, he was a peculiar fellow. But hey, we're all working at a peculiar job. Orientation came and went and without any issues, and soon the attraction had started. To understand the story, let me explain where I was located in the attraction. I was located in a large maze outside of the main house with about 5 other guys, including Daniel. These 5 guys were scattered throughout the maze, and I was at the center of it in a large rectangular room. The room was enclosed, unlike the rest of the maze, and had 2 exits. All of the guys besides Daniel were around my age, which was 18. Honestly, I don't even know whose brilliant idea it was to put a lone girl in a large maze with 5 guys. Thankfully, I was somewhat friends with one of the guys, so I didn't feel too alone. However, this friend was located at the tail end of the maze. Daniel was located decently close to my room, but that didn't bother me at first. There was no reason for Daniel or any of the other guys to enter my room. They all had their own positions to handle. One other thing to understand about this maze is that all of the actors were still able to see one another, because the walls in the maze were relatively short. So despite being far away from my friend, I was still able to see him. Now I hope that I explained that clearly. Nothing strange occurred the first 2 nights, but on the 3rd night, Daniel made his move. When no customers were going through the attraction, the actors would just walk around the maze or sit on the ground to relax. During these times, I would leave my room and either sit on the ground somewhere or enter the main house to grab a bottle of water. In order to enter the main house, I would have to go through the maze and pass Daniel's area. The first few times that I did this, Daniel said nothing and would just watch me. On the 3rd day, he finally mustered up the courage to say, "Hey, how are you?" Not thinking anything of it, I happily replied and carried on to fetch a water bottle. From then on, anytime I passed him, he always had some comment. It was harmless things at first, like, "You're really good. The weather's nice out here. You're a pretty scary actor." So other than him always having something to say, I really didn't think too much of it. Days continued on and Daniel kept getting a little braver. In between breaks, he would awkwardly walk towards the center of the maze. He moved really slowly, like he was trying to be stealthy. My only saving grace was that before he could reach my room, a group of customers would begin to approach and he would have to run back to his position. This is when alarm bells began to ring. I knew that there was no reason for Daniel to leave his position and come to mine. Now, whenever I saw that he was motioning towards my room, I would go out the other direction in hopes to put more distance between us. It didn't help that he was dressed in a scary costume and wearing a mask. This only added to the tension. On the times where I chose to sit on the ground and wait for customers, Daniel would go through the maze and stand where a single wall separated us. Looking back, I should have just walked away. but I didn't want to come off as a rude, punk-ass teenager. This is when he introduced himself, even though we already did that on orientation day. Trying to play nice, I introduced myself and we shook hands. And then he said the words that I will never forget. "You're beautiful." This caught me so off guard that all I could say was, "I'm sorry." He then repeated himself and kept his gaze locked on me. I very awkwardly replied, "Thanks," and refused to make eye contact with him. Keep in mind, I'm an 18-year-old girl and he's a man in his 40s. I'm also covered in sweat, mud, and fake blood. Thoroughly creeped out, I was now determined to avoid him at all costs. Whenever we had breaks, I now went through the maze in the opposite direction of Daniel in order to get to the main house. It was a longer way, but it was worth it. Daniel soon noticed this and now put more of an effort in walking towards my room between breaks. There were several times where he actually entered the room, but thankfully, I had the wits to leave the room entirely and go stand where my friend was. Daniel would just stand in my room, look around, and one time, he sat down on the floor. It was actually comical sometimes to see him standing in my room, realize that customers were coming, and then rush out of there and back into his position. Sadly, with how dark the maze was, I couldn't always keep a sharp eye on Daniel's whereabouts. There was one incident where he approached me unexpectedly and said, "I like the way you scream." One of my lines that I said in the attraction to customers was, "You can't leave me, I need you." And Daniel just absolutely ate that up and loved it. Well, you can bet after he said that he liked that line, I stopped using it. I had to endure a month of this, but over time, Daniel got the message that I was not interested. In retaliation, he began to steal my scare points. There were certain areas, scare points near my room, that I would pop out and scare customers. These scare points were accessible to the other actors, but no one else used them but me. I suppose Daniel was mad that I wasn't giving him any attention, so he decided to steal my scare points as revenge. He also began to copy some of my lines. Thankfully, towards the end of the haunt season, the managers of the attraction moved me inside the main house. I'm not sure why, because I didn't say anything to them about Daniel, even though I know I should have. So for the final days of working there, I was nowhere near Daniel. When the season ended, I was relieved. However, the managers had the bright idea to open a Christmas-themed haunted house, and they asked me to work it out. I loved the job and didn't plan on having a creep ruin it for me. Although many actors from the Halloween season didn't return for the Christmas attraction, Daniel was not one of them. He was there, and boy was he thrilled to see that I had returned as well. This time, however, I convinced my best friend to work there. So with my best friend being there, she sort of acted as a deterrent for Daniel. Throughout the whole season, he never approached me. Well, that was until the final night. My friend and I were chilling in one of the rooms and waiting on customers. This room was the first room in the attraction, so everyone else was passing through in order to get to their positions. Daniel began to pass through, and then suddenly turned back around to face my friend and me, again with those beady, never blinking eyes, and he said, "I think you two are beautiful." I just cringed and looked away as my friend shyly replied, "Thank you." So overall, Daniel is pretty creepy, but I suspect that maybe he doesn't know what he's doing is wrong. I don't think he really realizes that flirting with young girls and trying to be in a room alone with them is okay. I caught word that there might be something wrong with him, but I don't know for sure. But the feeling of dread I had in that maze is a feeling I will never forget. In retrospect, I really should have told someone. I kept telling myself that if Daniel did one more thing or tried to enter my room again, that I would tell the managers. One thing that I can think of that at least lightens the mood is that his costume was literally a tree man. His mask was just a tree with a contorted, scary face. When customers would walk by, they would all shout, "Look, it's Groot." It got a good laugh out of me every time. If I explain the story poorly, I'm sorry, and please ask anything if you're confused. So Daniel, maybe you're just looking for love, but you're looking in the wrong places, man. I'm assuming that I will see you again this coming season, and if I do, please stay away from me. This happened over a decade ago, but I only recently found this sub and I think it's a good fit. It was Halloween of 2008. I was in college and still in a relationship with my first serious boyfriend. We had been together since high school, and it took this night to show me our relationship was abusive. It took one more incident before I finally left him for good. He was wonderful when sober, if intense and controlling, but when he was drunk, I learned that he was truly terrifying. This was the first such incident that truly scared me. He had joined in a stupid game, a Gatorade and Shine challenge. They would empty a bottle of Gatorade at least halfway, fill the rest up with moonshine. The goal was to finish the bottle within an hour and to have them tell crazy stories. When he completed the challenge, but he never did tell his friends the story. He couldn't remember most of it, and it painted him in a horrific light. He knew things were heading downhill when he started calling me bad names, after saying hi to a guy friend at a party that we were at. I decided that we'd better head home before he got any worse. I thought that I could nip it in the bud and manage it. We got home and changed out of our costumes. James wanted to have sex, but in his state, and after what he had called me, I wasn't interested. Oddly enough, it led to him calling me more names. I left the apartment to go smoke. Our neighbors were having a party and two guys were outside smoking as well. They came over to see if I was okay. I had been crying and they had heard the yelling. I said I was, which they could obviously see was a lie. They let me know if I needed help, that they would help me. And James chose that moment to come outside. Said that he had heard us and told them to get away from me, stalking towards them. I stood up to get between them. They told me that they had meant what they said and to not forget it, and then told him to watch himself. I was facing them to say bye and thanks for the other when one of the guys gasped, staring at my boyfriend in shock. I turned around and my eyes immediately caught on the ground. Just as what I was seeing registered, the other guy lunged forward and grabbed me, pulling me behind him. What was on the ground that had elicited such reactions, you might ask? Blood. Blood was dripping on the ground from his hand. He was holding a knife so tightly that he had sliced his own hand open. I begged him to drop it, which he only agreed to when I walked back towards him. I was an idiot, I know. The two guys seemed at a loss, and I feel so bad for them having their Halloween ruined by this scary, crazy stuff. They left me to it after I swore that I'd be fine, reiterating that I could come to them for help. We got inside and I immediately started hiding all the sharp objects, calling James' roommates begging that they come home. He started screaming at me to give him the knives back, how I was horrible and I wouldn't even have sex with him. What use was I? I called my parents and left, and then called his mom because I was scared that he would hurt himself. She let me know that he was my problem now. I should have called the police, but I didn't want to ruin his life. I know. I'm ashamed to say that I got back together with him for 6 more months of hell after that. But today I can safely say, James, please, let's not meet again. Ever again. This took place a while ago. I was 13 and my family had just moved to a new town. A new friend of mine from school and I made plans to go trick-or-treating together. At the time, I remember thinking I was a bit too old to still be trick-or-treating, but who doesn't want free candy? My friend and I figured that we still had 1 year of trick-or-treating left in us. Because we were 13 and lived in a fairly safe neighborhood, my parents thought that it was fine for us to trick-or-treat together without adult supervision. Everything was going great and we were having fun, getting some solid candy, etc. And then we rang on one guy's doorbell. The porch light was on and there was a pumpkin or two, so we figured the people in the house were likely to be handing out candy. A middle-aged man opened the door. At first, I was glad because he was dressed in costume, and happy to see my friend and me, so I felt that we were on for some top-tier candy. I don't even remember what candy he handed us, but I do remember what happened next. He asked us to enter into his home, which is weird, but we were 13, so we didn't really think anything of it. And then he asked if he could take our photo. He said that he always liked to take photos of the kids every Halloween because he loved seeing the costumes. On one of his walls were a bunch of pictures of different random, unrelated children in Halloween costumes. At this point, even being a dumb 13-year-old, I was starting to get kinda creeped out. I figured it was best not to upset the man, and let him take the picture and then we could leave. So, he snaps the photo of us and then he pulls out a clipboard with a sheet of paper on it, with a bunch of names written in childish handwriting. He says that he likes the kids whose pics he's taken to sign their names so he can know who they are. At this point, we were both mega creeped out. We should have just run away, but we were too conditioned not to be rude. I decided to sign a fake name. He looked at the paper, looked back up at me and then down at the paper, and then he repeated the fake name that I had given, and I nodded. Luckily after that, he didn't do anything and we were free to leave, but it definitely creeped us both out. At the time, I thought he was just an eccentric guy, but as an adult, looking back on the story, it seems much more sinister. I'm so glad nothing bad happened to us, and hope nothing bad happened to any other kids. Halloween with all these costume kids trick-or-treating in the dark and minimal parental supervision could be a great opportunity for predators to get kids alone in their homes with no one knowing the kids' whereabouts. Please stay safe out there, and happy Halloween, everybody. It was my turn to take my kids trick-or-treating. The previous year was my wife's, and we trade back and forth every year. My son and daughter are ages 7 and 9. Usually, I stay on the street while my kids go up to the different houses to collect candy. After about half an hour of walking around, we came to one of the more popular hotspots for candy collecting, a main street in the neighborhood. Lots of really cool decorations and animatronics on people's lawns. So, I became a bit distracted and I stopped watching my kids closely. At one point, they came back from a house accompanied by another girl about the same height as my daughter. She was wearing a weird homemade mask, like a cardboard cutout or something. My daughter asked me if she could trick-or-treat with us, so I said sure and we carried on together as a group. I didn't know who this girl was, but I figured she was a friend from school. As we continued, I started to notice a large man trailing us. He was wearing some sort of angry cat mask. It was kind of creepy, to be honest. I thought that maybe he was the father of the girl, so I tried to start up some small chat with him. I said something like, "Nice weather, huh?" But he didn't respond. He just stood there staring at me, while our kids went up the stairs to the next house. I tried again asking, "Hey, is that your daughter?" He nodded but didn't say anything. I figured he just wasn't in the mood for chatting, so I stopped trying. We carried on for about another 15 minutes until suddenly, my kids came up to me and said that they wanted to go home. This surprised me as we hadn't been out for too long and their bags were only about a third full. In any case, I agreed, waved goodbye at the man in the cat mask and his daughter, and started on our way home. The weird thing is that when I glanced back at the man and his daughter were just standing there staring at us. I checked one more time as we turned the corner and they were still standing there, not having moved at all. At this point, I decided to ask my kids, "So, who was that girl?" My daughter looked up at me with a confused look on her face. "She's your friend," my daughter replied. I asked her what she meant. Apparently the girl with the cardboard mask approached them and said that she was a friend of mine. She told my daughter she was too shy to ask me if she could join us to trick-or-treat, and wanted my daughter to ask me instead. I laughed at this story and replied to my daughter, "Why would you think she was my friend? I don't have any children friends." What my daughter said next chilled my bones. According to her, when the girl with the cardboard mask had approached them for the first time, she wasn't wearing the mask. So they were able to see her face. As it turns out, she wasn't a girl at all, but an older woman around my age with wrinkles on her face. What's even more disturbing is the old woman had started to steal treats from my daughter's bag, apparently when I wasn't looking. This is why they asked me to go home. The old woman was creeping them out and they wanted to just get away from her. I brought my kids home and told my wife what had happened. We made sure to check through all of their candy but didn't find anything suspicious or off. We didn't call the cops or anything, since nothing really happened. But thinking back, I kind of regret that decision now.